Our schools, all 6 million students, have been in distance learning since March.
But we recognize there's been a learning loss because of this disruption.
I don't like distance learning very much at all. I'm someone that likes to be in a classroom.
It's a lot different studying at home. I don't like it nearly as much as I do studying in person.
I didn't really like how I was just staring at a screen. I felt like it got very monotonous.
Even though your teacher sends videos, she doesn't really describe them that well.
It's very glitchy and we can't even hear what people are trying to say.
It's just not a substitution to in-person learning.
But I'm really worried about the kids that are in poverty, that don't have what the other kids have.
We know that there are learning gaps and that it's not unique to COVID-19.
How do we get those students connected who are disconnected when they leave our school district and they go home?
Coronavirus has really highlighted a lot of the inequities that were either right on the surface or brewing right below the surface.
It won't be a normal return to school as we have every year.
We may actually have to be very flexible with our school models.
We're trying to create things that honor the social distancing requirements, but don't create a system that's scary for kids.
The thing that I miss the most about school is constantly having something to motivate me.
That feeling of gratification when it comes to learning a subject and applying yourself.
I want to see my friends and my teachers. I also miss my friends and I also miss playing.
I miss recess at school. I want to go back to school in the fall.
There's not going to be a common open for every single school in the district. There is no one-size-fits-all for our schools. Together, we are working to meet the needs of our 6.2 million students.
ABC7 presents Education, a Bay Area Conversation.
And there is so much to discuss. Thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of ABC7 News. I'm Ama Dates with Leanne Melendez. Instead of our 4 p.m. newscast, today we're going to spend the hour talking with experts and you in an ABC7 Listens virtual town hall on education.
And Alma, we're taking a closer look, right, at the future of education in the wake of COVID-19. This is an important 1-hour virtual town hall airing on TV, on abc7news.com, YouTube, and Facebook. February. In mid-February, many families were planning for graduations, some anticipating college acceptance emails, or making plans for spring break, or even thinking about summer. Then all of that came crashing down without warning. We were left feeling vulnerable, not knowing what the immediate future would bring. It seems so very long ago. In February, with limited reported cases in the U.S., Americans were told the risk of coronavirus may be lower than the flu.
We're exercising an abundance of caution.
Meanwhile, many educators were already calling for action in schools to minimize the risk of it spreading.
You wash your hands. Number one, just wash your hands.
By mid-March, COVID-19 had exploded into a worldwide public health crisis. Colleges shifted from in-person to online instruction. The K-12 public school system followed suit, issuing a temporary closure order.
This decision will pose difficult times for the families and students who depend on our schools.
In-school meals and after-school programs were halted. Many had hoped this hiatus would give the virus a chance to somehow dissipate on its own. It never did. Citing concerns over the continuing spread of the virus, on April 1st, Governor Gavin Newsom announced all public schools were to be closed for the rest of the year.
We should not prepare to bring our children back into the school setting.
This sent students, teachers, and parents diving into unknown, uncharted waters.
How do we ensure that they get their instructional time? How do I manage work? How do I manage the household?
Overnight, a teacher's education plan included a new platform, Zoom remote learning.
Of course, there's no substitute for, in-person education.
Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Martinez. How are you?
Teachers like Marissa Martinez improvised, trying anything to engage students while her 11-year-old daughter recorded her lessons. All of that while taking care of her toddler.
You must be exhausted.
I am. It's it's a fine line of insanity. Let me tell you that much. So I don't pay my babysitter during the day enough money, I believe now. I've realized that.
Distance learning also highlighted the technology gap among students. Some school districts relied on their diminishing funds and donations to quickly purchase laptops for students and devices that would give families internet access at home.
This pandemic has made clear that wireless service should be just like water, electricity, it's a necessity.
Many students resisted online learning and acknowledged that technology cannot replace teachers.
I felt like while I was in a classroom, I was learning a lot more. It was a lot more spontaneous and unpredictable. I could interact and talk with my peers and the teacher, ask questions if I wanted to. And in this new online format, I found it hard.
There are expectations that schools will reopen in the fall with in-person learning, like this one in France. This is what it may look like. We visited Phoebe Hearst Preschool in San Francisco. They have already trained staff to take a child's temperature 3 times a day. No more than 10 in a classroom. Each child will have a box with supplies and a tray they will carry around, all sanitized at the end of the day. And those hula hoops will be used to encourage physical distancing.
The teachers have already been addressing that on Zoom with the children and talking about social distancing. Andy, who's the lead teacher, along with Tina in this classroom, actually has told the children that they can spread out their arms, and if you can touch someone, you're a little bit too close.
So as we envision any classroom in the next school year, actor Tom Hanks' Skyline High School class of 1974 offered some words of hope for the graduating class of 2020 and for anyone who wishes to listen.
You have been chosen by fate to lead the way in whatever our post-pandemic world is going to be. Make it a great one, would you? We're all relying on you.
But no pressure. There's a lot to discuss with our live panel today. Zooming in today, we have Nancy Albaron, San Jose Unified School District Superintendent, Dr. Vincent Matthews, San Francisco Unified School District Superintendent,
Dr. Kyla Johnson-Trammell, Oakland Unified District Superintendent, and Tony Thurmond, California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. You heard Tom Hanks say, make it a great one. Now, I have so many questions for you. I want to start the conversation with Dr. Matthews. If you had the opportunity, the chance to sit down with, let's say, an elementary school child, to sit down and tell him what the fall will bring, what it will look like, what would you tell him or her?
Thank you. And thank you for holding this town hall, this meeting. A number of things. One, we long to be back with you. We miss you so much. We long for you to be back in the classroom. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that it's safe for you to be back. And so as a district, what we're going to go through is a planning process, a facilitated discussion with the community to figure out what that learning will look like, and then when we can bring you back in a safe way. And I definitely would highlight that what's paramount and what's most important is your safety. And that's why we're doing things the way we're doing them right now.
And that's what I want to ask State Superintendent Thurmond. Districts are desperately waiting for that, for the California Department of Education to release the so-called roadmap to reopen. I call it the how to reopen. It's happening, I'm told, in early June. Does that give districts enough time? Let's say it's, June, July, and then August. Will they have enough time to prepare?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. And we call it a how-to also, because we understand that this has never been done before. And for 1,000 school districts to move together, we want to make sure that they've got the best information that can be provided. We've been calibrating the guidance that we've been writing by talking to our school districts at the same time. Last week, we hosted a call for 1,000 school districts, and we've been doing the same this week as well. And we know through our best practices that we have ways to keep our students safe and ensure that they can receive a quality education at the same time.
And let's talk about that a little more. So I know San Mateo County, in fact, their Office of Education has already put together a pandemic recovery framework, a draft of it anyway. So while these school districts are waiting for state guidance, let's talk to you, Dr. Johnson-Trammell. What's your timeline on getting a plan together? And we do encourage you all to speak to each other. This is a conversation, so feel free to talk to each other. You don't have to wait for us to jump in either.
Well, conversations, I know in our districts and in most of the districts with the wonderful folks that I'm surrounded with tonight, we've actually been thinking about the fall since March. And just in learning and what this pandemic is, learning about the virus, we're in the middle of a global health crisis. There have been many conversations going on to begin to imagine and have parents, students. I've hosted various Insta Lives with my students just around. It takes a minute for people to digest the gravity of this moment and what it means for our schools and for society. And so I think back to Dr. Matthews' point, what's important now, and it was underscored in our webinar with the state, is the importance of involving community and involving many people in the planning. And as I've been saying over and over again, the fact that we're planning under conditions that will continue to change. And so we're gonna have to continue to be nimble and evolve. And what we may arrive in terms of a plan in July, by the time we open up in August, we may have to shift then. And so that takes a minute, many conversations, for people to digest what it is that we're planning for with lots of unknowns, and trying to get as much information about all the worries and fears that people have, given the level of uncertainty that we're all living with.
Yeah. Dr. Johnson-Trammell, I have a follow-up to that. You wanted to involve parents, obviously. There is a survey out there asking them what that fall reopening would look like. You mentioned that some might be in-person instruction, some might be online instruction. There is even one of the 6 or 7 scenarios where you ask parents, do you think we should go year-round? I mean, that would pretty much solve the problem right there of lost time. Is that practical? Is it financially practical? And have you involved the unions, the teachers' unions?
Well, I think we all have to be clear. There's no plan that can be concrete and ready to go without our labor partners, period. They're a crucial and critical stakeholder in this. And we also want to know from parents, because when we're planning, I'm homeschooling 2 children, and so I live this crazy life every day. And my kids are 10 and 12. I often think about what life is like for parents that have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so it's important to kind of get the planning and perspectives of the whole spectrum from pre-K 12. And so where we're at in this stage is just gathering all of the what if questions, the concerns, so that we can calibrate as we're continuing to scenario plan, obviously with our labor partners, with our principals, with some of our key essential workers that are gonna have to help carry out the plans that we all are gonna arrive on in the months to come.
And I'm one of those who has a kid between 1 and 3. She's 2.5, so I have a lot of questions about the really little ones. Nancy Abran with San Jose Unified School District. I want to talk to you a little bit about the plan for things that we know need to be worked in for kids who might return back to school, such as masks. How do you deal with that with the little ones? My little one is sure not going to be able to wear a mask or keep it on or understand why we're doing this. Have you guys worked through that at all?
So I'll answer the question in a minute, but I first want to open by just thanking you for putting this together. I think it's a great opportunity for people across the Bay Area to hear from the practitioners doing this work. I want to commend the incredible work that our teachers are doing, taking a system that is in person predominantly and moving it online overnight. And then the parents that are out there sitting side by side with their little ones in many cases because they are young. And then the parents of the older students or the caretakers of the older students that are ensuring that they're continuing to engage despite the circumstances that we're under. I mean, I'm a parent too, so I have a lot of empathy. We're also highly trained individuals in this field. However, we find it challenging as parents to be able to navigate all the requirements of having students learning from home. So big thank you to everybody for the patience, the understanding, and the compassion that we've seen. Regarding any health and safety requirement, I really believe that as leaders, that is front and center of our thinking. And we will obviously look to the medical experts for guidance in that area. I just, in my county, really grateful for the leadership of Dr. Sarah Cody. She's been incredible in communicating with us, and as this environment is changing. But I do know that is top of mind for families. We put out a survey, and that is coming in as the #1 priority of families, understanding what is going to be required to ensure the health and safety of students. So I do, and I know across all the conversations that I've had with leaders of systems across the state and outside of the state, that is top of mind.
Okay, and we want to pause right here. We are going to continue this conversation. We have so much more to get to, including messages from students about what they're facing right now and what they're looking forward to. And you are part of this ABC7 Listens Town Hall as well. We want you to join in the conversation and ask questions. All you have to do, go to Facebook, YouTube, abc7news.com, or the ABC7 News app to weigh in and interact in today's virtual town hall. All right, so we are back. Our panelists are still here, and we are going to continue on with the conversation. So we were talking about San Jose Unified and masks and all of the things, the cleaning, the sanitizing. Has anyone else really tackled that problem yet? Let's go to Dr. Matthews to start that off.
Well, thank you. As I said earlier, we are going through a conversation with the community, and what we're looking at is, what you've heard a lot of people are saying is the reopening of schools. And what we're actually terming it as is what will learning look like in the fall? Because before we get to that place of masks or sanitizers, we have to figure out what are the options that we have. And then for each of those options, what do we need to have in place to safely bring students back? And if those things aren't in place, then the conversation becomes, okay, how do we make sure that they're receiving the highest quality learning possible? We know right now that even our medical professionals are struggling to get enough sanitizer and enough masks. And so you think about adding 3, 4, 5 million students back into the system, and each of those districts trying to get masks and sanitizer and cleaning solution, it absolutely is going to be a challenge for the state, the entire state. So these are the kinds of questions we will be weighing and asking ourselves as we consider what learning will look like in the fall.
One of the questions that our listeners is asking is, how about special needs kids? How do you present to them a mask when they won't necessarily understand?
If I could, I would speak to that. It is different, and we have to acknowledge that. But we, many of our child care centers are open throughout the state, and many of our young people are wearing masks at school. Now, obviously, children are going to do what they're going to do, and sometimes they take their masks off. And we have to talk with them openly about all the things that we're doing now to help ourselves.
Okay, we're going to have to interrupt for just one moment. I apologize, but we're going to come back live.
Something I would like to see in the future is we would do some work at home and some work at school.
Probably thinking that there's going to be people, probably police or something, that's making sure people are 6 feet away. And I'm looking forward to go back to school in fall because I want to see my friends and my teachers.
I kind of want a mix of both, where we go 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. Annabelle?
I want to go back to school.
Charlie?
I don't want to go back to school.
Don't want to go back to school?
Honest. Very honest answers from Bay Area elementary school students about what makes distance learning difficult. Truly, we were talking during the break, inviting our listeners to also participate and ask questions. And one of those was, of course, how do we include special needs children? To any one of you, please.
Well, I would just say that the Department of Education is putting out guidance every week on how we support our children with disabilities, including those who have been served through distance learning. And we'll continue to provide that support to our 1,000 school districts. We know and have heard from some that there may need to be some exceptions to practices like wearing a mask for some of our students who may have sensitivity to wearing a mask, and that we may need to think about ways that we can serve those students safely. That may mean that others may need to really maintain 6 feet of distance while we're supporting those students for the safety of everyone. So we know it's complicated, but the things that we're asking people to think about doing in school are the things that we're really asking everyone to do right now. Hand washing, wearing a mask, and maintaining 6 feet of distance. Our child care centers are doing it right now. It's complicated. I know it's hard to get your mind around it. It is for me as a parent, but this is what we're gonna have to do to really work towards keeping our students safe and the people who care for them, our educators.
I would say the other area where we're getting information from is from our parents, and our parents are consistently at every board meeting. We have advocates for our special needs students, and they are letting us know what's working and what we need to do better. And they give it, and it's not only just you need to do better, but this is how. And so taking that information I think the entire system is learning, and we're going to continue to grow and figure out how do we do distance learning for all of our students in a way that provides them a high quality education.
Can we talk about money for just a second? We all know that this is going to cost districts a lot of money. Superintendent Thurmond, how confident are you, and perhaps all of you, that we will get federal dollars, and what if we don't?
Well, I can't speak to what the federal government's going to do, but I can tell you that we continue to advocate for them. I was on the phone with the head of the Department of Agriculture this week, because there's $500 million that California could be using right now to make sure that hungry kids get a meal. There's no question we need the support of the federal government that Speaker Pelosi has been calling for to make sure that we have the supply, the very supplies that we're talking about. And so we need to continue to call on the federal government to support all of our states, not just California. If that doesn't happen, then the California legislature is going to have to make some decisions about whether or not we can provide additional revenue for our schools, because there is no question that our schools need the revenue to take on these additional requirements. What I'm confident about is that the state of California will work with our schools to assist our schools in getting face coverings and hand sanitizer and the resources needed to address health and safety needs in our state. I'm very confident of that, and I want our school districts to reach out to our office if they need help in how to access those types of supplies.
Okay, so let's talk to the superintendents here now. If there isn't money, this is a difficult question, a difficult conversation. If you have to make cuts, where do you even begin? Everyone is so vital to help take care of our kids and give them the education they need. Let's begin with you, Dr. Johnson-Trammell.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to say is, I believe we have to plan with the reality in mind, but we have to lead knowing that there is abundance, there are resources out there, and I know there's lots of advocacy. I want to thank our governor, the state. There are many advocacy groups that are focused on putting pressure that really needs to be there for the federal government to really step up and support public schools across the nation. Whether we're talking about food distribution, that's one area. Whether we're talking about closing the digital divide, that is another area. And I want to continue to lift up in this moment the need to continue to invest in teachers and broadening who are thinking about as teachers at this moment. It's our classroom teachers, but it's going to be our paraeducators. It's going to be our social workers, our nurses, our counselors, our youth workers. We're going to need everyone who touches students and families to understand how to support both in distance learning. And back to your question around safety, it's both the PPE, but it's also the intense investment around the mental health of our students and of all of the folks that are supporting our students and what they're taking on in this moment. And so we all are having to plan with a lot of unanswered questions, but that's what we do as leaders. We have to continue to plan knowing that it is our obligation to provide learning for students. Given the uncertainty financially, all of us are both planning for a lot of different scenarios, again, in partnership with our labor partners around in-person learning and virtual learning, both because of a lot of uncertainty, whether we're talking about finances or also whether we're talking about if it's going to be safe or not. But back to where Dr. Matthews started the conversation, our responsibility is to make sure there is an environment for our students to learn, even though it's going to look probably nothing like what we were used to prior to March.
Sounds like you're going to need to hire more teachers. Superintendent Albaran, we're not going to be able to see, for example, 21, 25, 30 students in a classroom. So where do you get the money to hire more teachers, and are you training them right now?
So I think first and foremost, I believe that our workforce is our most valuable resource. You know, most districts, 80% of our budget is people. And we know that when you have the best and the brightest, you can do incredible things for students. And so we in San Jose are prioritizing having those employees, particularly our teachers that are in the classroom, building those relationships and being advocates for students. We know that there is going to be a set of services that are going to be more dire than ever because of the situation that students are in. We're hearing lots of students needing mental health services, additional supports because of some of them feeling isolated. So those are all services that we are prioritizing, and we're going to do everything we can, again, in collaboration with our labor groups to make sure that we can meet as many needs as possible. We understand the implications that this crisis has created, and that California public schools are going to be funded very differently. We already, in normal times, we're at the bottom. Of all the 50 states, and I don't know if the public knows this, we are, depending on what study you look at, we're bottom 5 in some, bottom 10 in others. But when you are in that situation and living in the most expensive area in the country, that really is a constraint. But I think in order to navigate the crisis, you need to work with your labor groups and your communities, so to build understanding around the situation and to get clear about what sacrifices need to be made to be able to adequately meet the needs of students. There are a lot of things that we like to have that we won't be able to afford anymore, but always keeping health, safety, and student well-being at the forefront of our thinking in those decisions.
All right, we're going to pause now. We want to go to break, but everyone at home, you are part of this ABC 7 Listens Town Hall as well. We want you to join the conversation, ask questions as well. Go to Facebook, YouTube, or abc7news.com to weigh in and interact in today's virtual town hall. We'll be right back.
Distance learning took a lot of adjusting to, even though I have had experience with taking an online class before.
Distance learning, I don't like it at all. Zoom is super awkward. It's super finicky and doesn't work half the time.
I don't think that it can focus the same way that I can in a normal school setting.
Being in a classroom environment, it allows students to be more engaged with what they're learning.
I think that distance learning is not a good substitution to in-person learning, but I think it's the best that they could have done.
So we're going to continue with this conversation, and we want to include our listeners. Mike Cinzano, he asks, what if parents don't want their children to wear a mask? Or if a student doesn't want to wear a mask, then what do you do?
Well, depending upon if that has been determined as part of our safety guidelines, students would have to wear masks if that is part of the safety guidelines. So, I mean, what we are keeping at the forefront, as I keep saying, is the safety of our students, the safety of our staff. And so whatever those guidelines are, the expectation is that the public will, and our stakeholders will do their part in being part of the community and following the guidelines.
If I could, I would add on to what Dr. Matthews has said. At the end of the day, our county health officers make the determinations about what needs to happen, very similar to how we interact in the community, where our public health officers say that people need to wear a mask. And so at the end of the day, that's how those decisions will be made. But I think it's fair to say that we anticipate that staff and students will have to be wearing a mask for their own safety and for the safety of those around them.
Can I ask any one of you, are you currently tracking students every day? I mean, how do you keep attendance? Because let's say they're learning their lessons through Zoom. They may or may not be on there. So how do you take attendance, or are you taking attendance?
So what we're using is we're actually tracking through students, their login and their contact. So we're able to see who's logging in, how many times they're logging in. But that's the way we're doing that right now.
Okay. Anybody else doing something differently?
We're using a similar structure, and we have participation rates of students who've been engaging in distance learning as a measure for attendance per school. And that is really what's helped us to focus on doing what we can in the moment to close the digital divide.
Okay, we're going to pause you right there. I apologize. We're coming back on air.
You're watching Education, a Bay Area conversation.
I feel like I get better education in the classroom than I do at home, even though my mom is a very good teacher. My parents are not as good as my teacher.
I don't like it because it's very glitchy and we can't even hear what people are trying to say. It's like a video game.
And I feel like it would be even harder because I don't know what the teacher will mean, because we're going to be learning about new stuff and it will be really hard for me.
Yeah, elementary school students shared their thoughts about what makes distance learning just so difficult. And teachers are really on a new frontier here. This is something unlike they've ever seen before. In fact, a USA Today poll says 1 in 5 teachers are unlikely to return to reopen classrooms in the fall. It's really no one's fault. This is just something that happened that we weren't quite prepared for. They weren't trained for this type of learning. So we want to find out what the different superintendents and school districts and on the state level, what's being done to help train these teachers and keep them prepared. Dr. Vincent Matthews, let's start with you.
Yes, so we've set up a curriculum professional development for our teachers. This went into effect immediately. And as you just said, a big highlight of this is you think about this as a system that was, developed in the late 1700s, and we've made some tweaks along the way, but pretty much it's that same system of teacher in classroom with students. And so to go from that to a system where teachers are not in the same physical space with their students takes training, takes development, and for some, they went right into it and quickly picked it up. For others, it took longer. But what we're doing now is we're assessing where we are. We're talking to the community. We're figuring out what went well so we can continue to do that, and also having the conversations about what we can do better. And that for us is what we want to do, is ramp this up because as we know, there's going to be different models, and pretty sure in some way, shape, or form, there will be some aspect of distance learning continuing in the fall. Not sure what that's going to look like or how in terms of numbers, but there will be some aspect. So we have to continue to figure out how to do this and how to do it better.
Could I ask any one of the superintendents, again, the money issue, we did not have standardized testing in March, obviously, because of the coronavirus. We know that that kind of testing costs districts a lot of money. And I'm just going to put this out there. What about just not having standardized testing and put that money towards something else? Is that a possibility?
So I guess I can speak a little bit to that. I think before the money aspect, I think if we look to the research, some optimal conditions are important for students to do their best when they take tests, any type of test, the SAT, our end of year standardized assessments that we take in California. But I think the recognition that we are in a crisis and that conditions are not optimal is, I think, really, really important, because our students are feeling this. They feel a real sense of loss, and many of them are really committed to doing well on those assessments. And so to put them in that situation, I think is a disservice to them. And I really appreciate that that was suspended, along with other things that were suspended, like the attendance taking and all of that. We needed the flexibility for families to be able to take stock of their situation, their schedules, their work schedules, and be able to make adjustments that met the needs of their family. And so I think with the testing requirements, for us, it's not so much about the funds. It's really about kids having optimal conditions to do their best on those types of assessments. And I do believe these conditions right now are not optimal for our students. And getting a bad result in some cases may just contribute to the anxiety that they feel, depending on how long this goes on for.
Dr. Matthews, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add on, Superintendent Albaran brought up an excellent point, and when she just started talking about flexibility, and we talked to this with Superintendent Thurman, but it's really important, as one of the things I recall and think about is those early days in March, that second week of March, when me and the board were trying to determine whether we were going to suspend in-class instruction. And a big part of the decision and the discussion, we were thinking about safety, but we were also thinking about what's in place, or what was the system in place at that time. And one of the things that we had to weigh was average daily attendance, which is how schools are funded. And at that point, there wasn't a waiver, but we determined that we just felt that at that point, schools weren't safe, and we closed them down. Subsequently, right after that, the state stepped in and put a waiver in place, which relieved all of us and allowed us to really focus on what learning was going to look like. Those waivers run out on June 30th. And so one of the things that we're sitting with right now is we're wrestling with what is education going to look like in the fall. And so, as Superintendent Albaran just said around flexibility, we are going to need flexibility in order to plan adequately. What we don't want to do is put a plan in place and then we find out that there is a regulation that stops us from doing what we need to do, what we believe is in the best interest of kids and families. So and as I said, we've talked, Superintendent Thurman is aware of this. We've talked to him, but our hope is that flexibilities that we have around average daily attendance, around instructional minutes, about the number of days, that those will continue so that we can plan without hitting a brick wall. We can plan with safety in mind instead of planning around and planning in the blind, as we actually, when we went into suspending in-class instruction, it was really in the blind.
If I could, two things that Superintendent Albaran said and Superintendent Matthews said that I think are important, that we should all continue to move with safety in mind and the well-being of our students. And we know that this pandemic has had tremendous negative impact on all of us, including our students. And we've seen high rates of suicide, we've seen depression, and we've got to first and foremost focus on the safety and the well-being of our students. And so we've been working with our statewide mental health organizations to fill in gaps. There are a lot of students who aren't connected. Their families aren't connected. And we know that they feel the impacts of the unknown around the pandemic. As Dr. Matthews has said, we want districts to have flexibility around things like instructional minutes and how much time students will have in instruction. We're already working to put some proposals forward that would do two things: give districts that flexibility that they need, but also give them some stable funding that they need to be able to carry out these sort of modified programs and plans. And so obviously the legislature has to act on these, but we are working on these, and we expect that we'll have the information and the answers, I would say, in days and weeks to come. But as all of our superintendents have said, right now, the main focus has to be the safety and the well-being of our students and how we support our staff. I believe it was Dr. Johnson-Trammell who talked about how we provide more training for our educators. And Our department provides, webinars every week. All the superintendents here have talked about how important our educators and staff are. We've got to support them. We even have virtual support circles where our educators give us feedback. Our students have given us feedback. And I've appointed a students council to give us feedback on how we improve distance learning. At the end of the day, we got to make sure that all of our families have access to a computing device and access to internet connectivity. And we're working with all of our superintendents and others on strategies to expand connectivity for our students so that we can improve distance learning and improve connectivity in our in-class instruction. Our kids should have access to high-speed internet, whether it's through distance learning or in the classroom. And we're continuing to work with our school districts on how to make these things happen.
Could I quickly ask Dr. Jansen-Trammell, regarding, in the fall when the students come back, what do you do with those students who need to catch up? What programs will you have?
So back to assessment, I think the focus is less assessment around standardized testing. I think all of us as systems leaders are going to need to focus on the impact of the months that we haven't been in school for students that we know haven't been as connected to distance learning and gaps that they may have in their educational experience, and plan for that through accelerations, through interventions, whether they be Saturday schools, creative approaches to what we traditionally have had as after-school programs. Many of those things may need to be virtually, but I think that is something particularly in school districts like Oakland, where we serve a high percentage of English language learners, newcomers, African Americans, immigrant students, students that are unhoused. We represent about 1,700 in Oakland, and we already know from the data, this was a question that was asked earlier in terms of participation rates of distance learning. And we know school by school, the number of students that have struggled around having connection and access, whether it's a device, whether it's hotspots. And I also want us to think about the tech support training for some of our students and families. And so those are things we're actively working on. We've set an audacious goal in Oakland in terms of being one-to-one, both in the classroom and at home. Because again, thinking about next year, we don't know when we're going to have to turn on a dime and be in more of a distance learning virtual format. And so for us to really still obviously be focused on wellness and health for students and staff, but we have to continue to focus on how we continue to have a learning environment in these unprecedented times. And the foundational support to do that is figuring out how we, in the immediate time, provide those supports to our students and families.
Thank you, Superintendent. We're going to leave it at that. You are part of this ABC7 Listens Town Hall meeting as well, and we want you to join in the conversation and ask questions. Go to Facebook, YouTube, or abc7news.com to weigh in and interact in today's virtual town hall. We will be right back.
I like distant learning because we don't have to spend as many hours as we do at school to do our schoolwork.
I also think I'm doing better in school because I get to focus more and I get to have less distractions and I can work at my own pace. The things I loved about distance learning is when we study together. The things I do not like about distance learning is we can't play at recess with my friends and see my teacher every single day.
So we're going to continue the conversation here. Dr. Jansen-Trammell, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. You were continuing with such a huge agenda, no doubt, come the fall. But I also wanted to ask you, there are some questions that our listeners are asking regarding, for instance, drop-off and pickup. How will that be handled? What if students are afraid or don't want to go inside the classroom? What do we do there?
So I will say, even before the pandemic, at the start of this school year, every single school, elementary, middle, and high, focuses on school culture and really solidifying routines for the start of school. If we are in a situation where it is safe, back to the safety, there's going to be a lot of ongoing training around what physical distance means. And we focused a lot in this conversation around the mask, but physical distance is a lot more than that. It's really helping kids and parents working with kids to understand how we have to change our interactions with others. And so really thinking about at the beginning of school, having to decrease the number of kids and families that are coming into a building at the same time and leaving. We have to think about our recesses differently, our passing periods differently, how we're serving food differently. Our regular ways that we've been serving cafeteria food for our students, we're not going to be able to most likely serve it in that same way. So all of those components really go into physical distancing, absolutely the mask, but also the constant conversation. So I think there's going to have to continue to be a lot of training, working again with our parents and our community to constantly have conversations to support students to understand how those interactions are going to be different, both in the classroom and outside, even in everyday life as well.
Okay, we're going to be coming out of a break, so we're going to pause it right there so we don't have to cut anyone off. But we are having this great conversation, and we'll be back on air in just a moment.
I'm really unmotivated to do my schoolwork and to do my schoolwork well because there's not that push that you normally feel.
I found it hard for me to be motivated to participate and to learn at the capacity I was.
Having it all be online has made it really difficult for me to learn. It's not what I'm used to.
I'm mostly feeling a bit stressed, I suppose.
I think in general, I'm a pretty disciplined student, but especially with distance learning, it's been really hard to disconnect from social media and talking to my friends since I'm surrounded by all of my devices all the time.
Devices are everywhere. Motivation, clearly a big issue with a lot of students learning at home. I want to tackle the big issue, the scary word, outbreak. What happens if someone at the school is known to be exposed to COVID-19? Does the entire school shut down for 2 weeks and then somebody else, then another 2 weeks? Tony Thurman, is there a state recommendation at this point or guideline? What do you do if someone gets COVID-19?
Well, we anticipate that there's going to be very concrete guidance coming out from the state through our Department of Public Health. And I think it will mirror what we've already heard through the CDC, that the most important thing we can do is prevention. In many cases, parents are asked, take the temperature of your children before they come to school. And if your child's not feeling well, please keep them home. What we're learning from our schools that are operating right now, they're mostly childcare centers, that our staff also take temperatures before students enter. And if there's a situation, CDC is already recommending that they create ways to support someone who might appear to not be well so as to prevent infection. And so we do expect that any day the state through the Department of Public Health and through will be providing some guidance specifically there. But taking temperatures is going to be very important to how we keep folks safe, and prevention is going to be the most important thing that we can do to keep our students and all of our staff and our families safe.
Let me ask you this, or any of the panelists, how do you deal with teachers who, let's say, are older, have underlying conditions, or even those who don't feel safe entering the classroom or the school? What do you do then?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, the previous point. I think back again to that last week in the second week of March. During that week, we ended up closing 3 schools, the week before, and then the last week, 2 schools. We had 4 board meetings because of the two of the schools, DPH strongly recommended that we close these schools because of high cases of pneumonia that the DPH at that point wasn't sure if they were COVID or not. And the reason I bring that up is because it goes back to the first question you asked about the student who says, I really want to go back to school. It is critical that we follow the health lead from the Department of Public Health, because we don't want to reopen schools just to close them back down. And I think it's critical that we are operating step by step. One of the things I'm most proud of is that the 6 counties have come together with the 6th Department of Public Health around the closure of schools and the extension of the closures, because we absolutely have to err on the side of safety. We want to keep our students safe. And I just want to overemphasize that when we're making these decisions, every adult I talk to in the system longs for the day when we are back to the system that we had in December and January, but we want that in a safe manner. We want to see kids back, but it has to be safe. And so this is for students, but it's also for all of the adults in the system. If there isn't confidence in the system, we're going to have parents not sending their students back. We're going to have adults not wanting to return, and we're going to have students not wanting to return.
Okay, so what do we do with sports? I have to ask that. Sports are so big among students and parents. What do we do about that?
I think, my children play sports. I played sports growing up, so I'm one that really is a supporter of athletics and understand the role that they play, particularly in the lives of students who really, that is their driver. That's why they come to school, because they look forward to those opportunities. So that is something that we're very concerned about, because we also know that is part of being a healthy student, is that exercise and that camaraderie, the skills that you develop being on a team, or being disciplined enough to practice and do a sport. However, again, I go back to Dr. Matthews' point about the health order, that when the health professionals tell us it's safe to do that, we will absolutely move in that direction. But absent that, I think that we have to prioritize the health and safety of our students and our community.
I do want to add that, as we think about, absolutely, we're following the guidelines put forth by the experts at the state level, at the county level, and at the city level. This is where we need to lean into the ingenuity and the creativity of our stakeholders. As I am on this call, my son is on an online class with his basketball team. And so his coach has already figured out, even though we can't actually be together physically, how can I still keep the boys engaged? How can they still work on their craft and get some interaction? And I think in all 3 of our school systems, we've run into different teachers, after school providers who on the dime have said, we've got to keep connections with students. They understand the physical distance guidelines. I think people get that intuitively, and people are working all over to figure out creative ways, which is why having a lot of the constantly getting feedback is so important. Because there's many places all over the state where there are custodians figuring this out, teachers, principals, and so we have to lean in that information as well.
Yes, I apologize for cutting you off there. We do have to go to break, but I want to remind you this conversation continues right now. And to take action, log on to our website, abc7news.com/take action. Links to resources and contact information for your local government officials to reach out and let them know your concerns about schools. We'll be back here, but we're going to keep continuing with this conversation online, so we hope you're with us. And we're back. I'm sorry, we had to cut you off. I want to ask a question real quick, because we talk about supporting not just our kids, but supporting our teachers as well. And this is a question from Megan. She says, if we're exposed by a student, or anyone for that matter, are there subs to take our class? Many teachers don't have weeks and weeks of sick time to deal with COVID. So maybe Superintendent Matthews, can you tell us a little bit about the support for teachers and if there are subs ready to go?
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes. We definitely have substitutes who remain in the system. The simple answer is yes. We have subs. At least when we left in March, we had subs.
Okay, and we have some other questions as well. Let's see. Liz is a mom. She has a child who goes to elementary school. How many kids can be in the classroom? Do we know? We don't know just yet exactly how many people can be in one classroom.
That's one of the things that, at least in our regional, our 6 regions, counties, that the Department of Public Health, that's one of the issues that the 6 of them have come together, and they are working on what they think is the optimal cohort size. So they haven't given us that guidance yet, but that's an area that they're working on directly with us. It's a back and forth conversation.
So
yeah, can I add to that?
Sure.
We right now we don't have like clear guidelines for schools, but there are childcare guidelines, and those are the ratios that we're thinking about as we look at different scenarios. But I think that's why that guidance is so important. But the current documents that we have available at least help us start thinking about what that might look like.
Yeah, and I know
And if I could add that
go ahead.
the 6 feet is really the number that people are thinking about, not the number of students in a class, but the ability to have 6 feet of spacing between the desks. That's the main feature that we expect to be in the guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, stay with us. We are going to come out of a break.
Dear class of 2020, well, we all know what's been happening. But fellow graduates, maybe we weren't made to walk that easy path. These crazy challenges in high school have been our mountains, and we're learning to climb. If these years are supposed to prepare us for life, maybe what we're figuring out is not only how to hunker down and deal, but how to get involved, to do our part, to do extra, so we face our challenges head on. Although the road before us isn't easy, we've got to remember we are not alone. Our families, our teachers, our mentors, and our communities, they've helped us get where we are.
That was beautiful. That's a video made by Kyle Trefny and Julian Jordan, students at Ruth Osawa School of the Arts who wanted to still create art even away from the classroom. Now, we want to thank our panel of experts for taking the time out of their busy schedules. I want to thank the district for feeding our children and their families. Amma?
Yes, absolutely. And we thank you all for all you do. And just remember, everyone, have compassion. This is new for everyone. This is the beginning of an important conversation as the school year approaches. We are continuing to follow these important stories, and we'll keep you informed and connected to resources. You can watch this town hall and our other town halls on abc7news.com, the news app, anywhere you stream. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.